Hello, boys and girls. Welcome to our teaching on 1 Samuel 27. We just left off on 1 Samuel 26 on kind of a cliffhanger, I guess, a little bit. David is going through a really tough time. He just had the third run-in with Saul, where Saul, for the third time, claimed he was repentant, but David didn't believe him anymore. David is really upset. So this is the third time. So remember, Saul was on the hill. Saul was camped on one hill. David was camped on the other one, and David went and took his spear and his water jug and everything. But what I want to focus on is after this exchange, Saul goes back home, and David does not. And in verse 1 of chapter 27, or 1 Samuel 27, David said in his heart, "Now I shall perish someday by the hand of Saul. There is nothing better for me than that I should speedily escape to the land of the Philistines, and Saul will despair of me to seek me no more in any part of Israel, so I shall escape out of his hand." So David has a really, really low point in his life. He is really he's really depressed. He's really upset, and sometimes when we're emotional, we tend to give up kind of easily. I don't know if you've ever been there. I know I was as a kid. I don't know if you ever get to the point where you're like, I don't know what's a good example. It's late at night. I'm trying to think of examples here. Maybe you're like, you just get so frustrated, you just like, I just can't do it. I don't even want to try anymore. Perfect. Here's an example. I've seen this a lot. Little kids, when they first learn to start tying their shoes, they get so frustrated. And they just go, I can't. They're trying to do it, and they're trying to do it, and after like 3 or 4 times, because 3 or 4 tries for a little preschooler is very difficult, they just go, I just can't do it. I just don't want to do it anymore. I just can't do it. And so they get really upset. And they just go, I'm just never going to know how to do it. I'm never going to learn. I'm never going to learn. And I don't know if any of you get like that. Maybe you get out like that, not about tying your shoes, but about math or shooting 3-pointers or whatever you're trying to do, and you just get frustrated because you just feel like you just can't do it. And you're like, I'm never going to be able to do it. Never again. Or maybe it's something in life where, you have run in with a friend or something. Nobody likes me. I have no friends and nobody likes me, or whatever else you're having trouble with. And David is emotional like this. I mean, it's kind of refreshing, honestly, to see. Not that it's good. It's not good of him to be this way. He's at a point that he's not trusting in God. We're going to see he goes a whole couple of chapters without trusting in God and without listening to God, and we see where it gets him. But you have to remember, the Bible isn't just a book of stories. Like, it's not like Aesop's fables or something. These are real people and real historical accounts, and obviously they're summarized and put in nice little chapters for us and everything, but these are real people, and they have real reactions to real problems. Saul was seeking David's life, and even though he's a godly man who trusted in God, he got really depressed and said, "That's it. This is gonna be my life. One of these days, I keep making these narrow escapes, and one of these days, I'm not gonna succeed, and Saul's gonna kill me." And I mean, David forgot God was protecting him. He was the anointed king of Israel. He, by rights, as the anointed king of Israel, could kill King Saul and take over the throne at any point in time. Think about that. By rights, he could do that. He was anointed king. But he gets really depressed, and he goes and makes the worst decision. He decides to move to the land of the Philistines. So he leaves Israel all the way. And the Philistines are at war with the Israelites. They're actually like, the Israelites have to like pay tribute to them, and the Philistines are kind of like over them. They are, they are not conquering them, but they're kind of like the big bully on the block at this point in time. So David goes, and he goes to, in verse 2, he rose with his 600 men who were with him, and he went to Achish, the son of Maoch, king of Gath. This is actually the same king before that David acted like he was insane with. But this time, he shows up not by himself, but with 600 men in tow. And so when you show up with essentially a big army, you get some attention, and you look like you have some prestige. You look important. And kings are more likely to listen to somebody they think is important. And so David shows up with his 600 men, and he comes in verse 3 and 4. He dwells there, and it was told to Saul that David had fled, so he didn't seek him anymore. He wasn't going to chase him into the land of the Philistines. But so David comes to the land of the Philistines and talks to Achish. Achish obviously wanted to talk to him, but was concerned what's going on with this guy David. Why is he here? All legitimate questions. So David comes to Achish. This time he's not in hiding. He's coming legitimately. And he says to him, if I have now found favor in your eyes, verse 5, let them give me a place in some town in the country that I may dwell there. For why should your servant dwell in the royal city with you? He basically comes to the king and says, hi, king. I would like to pledge my allegiance to you as king, and I would like to stay here with you, and I'll be loyal to you. And but we don't have to dwell here in the royal city. We can just stay in the outskirts of town. We can just have our own little town there, and we'll be loyal to you. We'll be your subjects. And and think of and think of it. He would be thinking like, this is a prestigious, very famous guy. Remember, David was a very famous guy. He was a celebrity in those times, not like an entertainer celebrity, but he was like a conquering hero celebrity. It would be like if back in the Revolutionary War times, George Washington was a very famous general, decided to move to, I don't know, Spain. And Spain would be like, oh, George Washington, we know you. We know who you are. Come on in. We'll make you an important person in our government. If George Washington came and said, hey, I'd like to be here. Or, whatever. General Eisenhower during World War II showed up in Australia. But David shows up, and the king's like, the king said, sure, and he gave him a place called Ziklag. Ziklag was the city. And if anybody remember from our history lesson, so if you remember from our history lesson from the study of Rome, what city was there a king who had no son, no heir to take over his throne? So he gave his city to the Romans to take over. Anybody remember what city that guy was from? It was on Asia Minor, to the right side of the map. It was Pergamum. Good job. I pressed the wrong button here. Anyway, so David pledges his allegiance to Achish, verse 7. Now the time that David dwelt in the country of the Philistines was 1 full year and 4 months. So a year and 4 months. We're told beforehand. The Bible sometimes does that. It gives you the full story, a quick summary, and then tells you the details. So takes place over a year and 4 months. And this is interesting. Verse 8, and David and his men went up and raided the Geshurites, the Girzites, the Amalekites. For those nations were the inhabitants from the land of old, as you go to Shur, even as far as the land of Egypt. Whenever David attacked the land, he left neither man nor woman alive, but took away the sheep, the oxen, the donkeys, the camels, and the apparel, and returned and came to Achish. And Achish would say, where have you made a raid today? And David would say, against the southern area of Judah, or against the southern area of Jerahmeelites, or against the southern area of the Kenites. So basically, he'd go out and he would end up attacking the enemies of Israel. It's a kind of a smart strategy, basically helping Israel and judging these nations. These nations are nations that the Israelites were actually supposed to have taken care of back in the book of Joshua, but they were just kind of sick of fighting. And in the book of Joshua, they were told to conquer the land. They were told to give them the land, different tribes. And if you remember, this tribe was given this land, this tribe was given this land. But some of them just got tired of fighting, got tired of walking, got tired of battling, and just said, let's just it's fine. This is all we need right here. We're good. And they didn't get their full inheritance. These are people that stayed in the land that they didn't remove. And so David would go and attack a particular village from the Amalekites or whoever, and he'd come back. And the Philistines didn't necessarily have a problem with the Amalekites or whoever. Maybe they did. I don't know. We don't really know. But he'd come back, and Achish was like, "Oh, where'd you guys go today? You and your soldiers?" And he'd be like, "Oh, we went to Judah, and we attacked a city in Judah, or this area, the Kenites, who were part of Judah here, part of around the area of Judah." And he would make sure not to leave anybody alive, lest they come to Gath and tell Achish what he did. But so in the verse 12, the last verse in this chapter, Achish actually believed David and said, "Oh, well, he's made his people Israel utterly abhor him, therefore he will be my servant forever." So it's actually kind of a cunning strategy in that he attacks these people, but he tells Achish that he's attacking Israel. So Achish thinks, "Oh, well, I mean, the people of Israel, they're going to hate David now. I mean, I thought there was some kind of problem between Israel and David because David's leaving Israel, but now I know it to be true. The people of Israel are going to hate him because he's attacking them all. They're going to view him as a war criminal. This is great. I thought he was going to be loyal to me before, he's definitely going to be loyal to me now." And so it's kind of a cunning strategy by David. But also, what's the problem? He's not trusting in God. And he can only keep the charade up for so long. He really should be battling against the Philistines as well. He should be battling against all of them. God's going to give him victory. But he's trying to be cunning. He's trying to make his own way and do it his own way. And whenever you try to do something your own way, it might work in the short term, but in the long term, it's gonna come to light, and it's not gonna work. So let's turn to 1 Samuel 28. 1 Samuel 27 was pretty short. But 1 Samuel 28. Now it happened in those days, verse 1, that the Philistines gathered their armies together for war to fight Israel. Okay, so think about this. Think, if you follow this with me. So David, this whole time, has been living with the Philistines and living with Achish. And he tells Achish, "I'm loyal to you. I'm not with Israel anymore. I'm done with them. I'm sick of them. The king and I have problems. I'm loyal to the land of the Philistines now. Consider me part of the Philistines. I'm your servant, Achish." And Achish is like, "Okay, great." And then he tells him the entire year, "Yeah, I've been not only that, I've been attacking the areas in Judah. I've been fighting against them. I've been raiding their villages, raiding their towns, and fighting against them and everything." Well, what would Achish think? This is a time that people go out to war, and the Philistines are going to war with the Israelites. Achish, seeing David, says, "Hey, David," what do you think he would say? "Hey, David, we're going to war with the Philistines. We can use some more good soldiers. I mean, we are the Philistines. We're going to war with the Israelites. We can use some more good soldiers. Why don't you join up? I mean, you love going and battling against your old country. You tell me all the time how much you battle them. Let's go. All of us kings of the Philistines are all going to gather in a huge, mighty army and go battle the Philistines and really take it to them. Why don't you come with us?" So David has a big choice here. David has never actually battled the Israelites. He's been lying about it the whole time, trying to make himself look better to the king. But he doesn't. I think he really has part in his heart where he doesn't really want to attack his family and friends and the people that he used to live with and his home country. I don't think he really wants to attack his home country. So that's why he's lying about it, trying to look good to the king, but trying to lie. He's got a scheme going. But now it's kind of come to a head, and he's like, "All right, let's go. Why don't you come with us?" So David has a big choice to make. If he says no to the king, like, "No, I don't want to attack Israel," then the king would be like, "Well, why not? You attack Israel all the time, don't you?" And he's going to figure out that David's been lying to him, and he's not going to be very happy. But then if David says yes, that would mean he's attacking Israel. He's for real this time. So let's see. He said, "You assuredly know that you will go out to battle, you and your men." He goes, "Hey, we're going out to battle. You guys come with us." So David said to Achish, he makes his decision, "Surely you know what your servant can do." And although this isn't specifically a yes, I think some people think it's a yes. Some people think he's like saying, "Hey, well, yeah, you know what I can do," and kind of saying it sarcastically without actually saying yes. But I think he kind of says to the affirmative, or at least is stalling trying to figure what's going on. Now we have a really weird. We're going to leave this scene. I'm going to leave this scene here in chapter 28. We're leaving, like I always say all the time, like the camera pans from one place to another. We're going to leave this situation where David is telling Achish, hey, you know what I can do. And so he says basically, yeah, sure, I'll go out to battle with you. And he's facing the idea of the next day going to battle with his old friends. And the camera leaves him and goes back upon Saul. We see where Saul is. We see what Saul's doing. And it's a really, really strange story that happens. One of the strangest ones in the Bible. It happens here in chapter 28. Verse 3. Now Samuel had died. We knew that a couple chapters ago. Samuel had died. And all Israel had lamented for him and buried him in Ramah, in his own city. And Saul had put the mediums and spiritists out of the land. So two little pieces of information that set the scene. Samuel isn't alive anymore. They had a funeral for him. Also, Saul is one of his, I don't know when he did, but however many years ago, he had anybody who had done any spiritual practice, and he says mediums and spiritists out of the land. A medium doesn't mean somebody who's like bigger than a small and smaller than a large. That's not what a medium is in this context. A medium is somebody who would like has a crystal ball and all this the magic stuff, and tries to communicate with spirits and stuff like that. And it's really terrible things that they're doing, and so really against God, like witchcraft. They're essentially witches, and Saul had put them out of the land. Now I don't know if he really wanted to, or whether Samuel telling him to do it or what, but he had basically made it illegal to do that. When people in Israel during the time of the judges, we know everyone was doing what was right in his own eyes. I mean, think of it. Think of back in the end of Judges, we talked about that guy Micah. Remember, Micah he was a Levite, and he became, and this lady made a little idol, a statue out of silver, and she's like, hey, can you be my priest? And he's like, well, sure. I mean, people were just doing crazy stuff back then. But anyway, when Saul became king, he got rid of all the witches and everything like that. So the Philistines are gathering together, and we know David's with them right now, and they're gathering together to go fight against Israel. And they encamped in Shunem, and Saul gathered all Israel together, and they encamped at Gilboa. It's about a 10 to 15 mile journey from Gilboa to where we're going to be talking about. When Saul saw the army of the Philistines, he was afraid, and his heart trembled greatly. And when Saul inquired of the Lord did not answer him either by dreams or by Urim or by the prophets. Interestingly, if you remember, the ephod, which is like this like garment that was the priest would have, and they would seek God with this garment. And there was one in Israel, the official one. And I don't know if you guys remember a few chapters ago, where did the ephod go? This would be really hard. I'd be really impressed if you guys remember. Did anybody remember? I don't know, because this is just a video and I can't hear you. But if anybody said Abiathar or Abiathar, however you pronounce his name, the son of the high priest at Nob, remember when all the priests at Nob had to come to Saul when Doeg was there, and Doeg killed all 88 of them, however many there were, and there was only one that escaped. He was a son of the high priest Abiathar. He took the ephod with him and met David there. So remember, he had taken the ephod. So now they don't have an ephod there, and they're not there. So I don't know what Saul's using to inquire of God. Saul's, maybe just hires somebody else and said, you're the priest now, and here, take this. This is your ephod, and basically had him seek after God, and like he would have for Samuel back in the day, like he had asked Samuel to seek after God, but Samuel's not around anymore, and neither is the ephod. The ephod's not around anymore. And he killed the high priest and the high priest's son and all the other priests at Nob. And the high priest's son is gone with the ephod, and so he's kind of out of luck. And so he's saying, let's inquire of the Lord. People are seeking God for him, but God's not answering. And so Saul's really afraid. He wants to hear an answer from God, what's going to happen, but he's not hearing anything. So he takes a very drastic step. he said to his servants, "Find me a woman who's a medium," a witch basically, "that I may go to her and inquire of her." And his servants, they seek after it, and they say, "In fact, there's a woman who's a medium at Endor." Um, Endor was, as I mentioned, 10 to 15 miles away from here. So here Saul is um, gathered together for battle. He's going to battle the next day. He's going to be in battle, in war. And this is not like, hey, this is a game. War is not a game. You're any second you could die. You could die literally any second in war. You're fighting for your life, literally. And he takes that night before, instead of resting or whatever, he goes and travels 10 to 15 miles on foot, not by car. If you're walking, you can do maybe, walking probably take you at like 3 miles per hour. You'd probably take you a couple hours, three plus hours to go 10 miles. Maybe 2 hours if you really book it. Maybe he's on a camel or something like that. And let's just say 2 hours, like a 2-hour walk to get there. So this is a pretty far walk. And so he goes to Endor, but he disguised himself. He put on other clothes in verse 8, and he went, and 2 men with him, and they came to the woman by night. And he said, "Please conduct a seance for me and bring up for me the one I shall name for you." So he tells her, "What I want you to do is I want you to contact someone who is dead." That's what the word seance means. And this brings up a topic that is, we kind of discussed it a little bit with the Egyptian priests when they were able to copy what Moses did. And so I said back then, there were, 2 options. Either they are faking it, or they do have some power, and the power is given to them not by God, but by Satan, and he has some limited power. Obviously, it's one of those 2 things when these people say what they can do. Like if, there are people that will claim that they can contact dead people, like, "Oh, I want to talk to Abraham Lincoln." Okay, I'll bring up Abraham Lincoln for you, or something like that. There's one of 2 things, okay? It's either fake or it's real and it's demonic. Let's talk about the real and demonic one first. Even if it's a real situation, a real somebody that they're talking to, it is not that person. If somebody claimed, "I'm going to bring up the dead person, Abraham Lincoln, for you right now," and you're going to talk to Abraham Lincoln, and they start saying, "Oh, Abraham Lincoln is saying I have a headache," or something, I don't know. They really aren't talking to Abraham Lincoln. Once you're dead, you're dead. Okay, that's it. There's no contact with them. Although I will say it is different in the Old Testament, because in the Old Testament they were in basically holding compartments. The way that life after death worked in the Old Testament was there was Hades and Abraham's bosom. They were basically a compartment with a large gulf in between. And they're both holding tanks essentially until Jesus came. And when Jesus died on the cross, those in Abraham's bosom were taken up to heaven. Those in Hades were brought to well, we'll get into that another time. But so this is the Old Testament. But even so, once you're dead, you're dead. And so when somebody claims to be contacting someone dead, let's say nowadays you could find somebody on TV or some network who's like, "I'm going to talk to a dead relative." "Oh, I want to talk to it." There are these people in the audience who are like, "I'd like to talk to my grandma," and they say, "Okay, I hear your grandma says this and this and this." It could be, number one, real and demonic, which would mean that somebody really is talking to that medium, but it's not the grandma, it's a demon or something like that who's talking to them. That is one possibility, but what is far, far more likely, okay, is that it's fake. I would say 99.9% of these people who claim to be doing this stuff are just fakers. It's actually pretty funny. There are some videos of people who get caught in their lies, and it's really, they have a lot of methods for it. They're like con men. They have a con, they have a trick that they would play. Sometimes they'll be like, they're an audience of 100 people, and they'll be like, They'll be like, does anybody, I'm sensing something. Is there anybody in the audience who knows somebody whose first name begins with an M or a J? Well, if you know anything about statistics, almost every name begins with an M or a J. Well, I'd say like, 2/3 of names begin with an M or a J. I mean, in our class, we have Mia, right? If I said, is there anybody in our class whose name begins with an M or a J? And Mia would be like, oh my gosh, that's my name. I'd be like, well, yeah, no kidding. You have a very good chance of getting somebody whose name begins with an M or a J, especially if you just say, is there somebody in the audience, out of 100 people, is there somebody that died that you really care about whose name begins with an M, or I'm getting an M or a J or something, and somebody comes up and goes, oh, I have somebody, and they bring them down, come on down, and they'll be like, now I'm sensing this person was somebody that you cared about. Yes, I did care. I cared very deeply for them. And they'll be like, I'm sensing a family member. Yeah. And each time the people are like amazed. Oh my goodness, yes. I mean, but you're just guessing. I mean, think about it. It's not that hard to guess. It'd be like if I said to you, is anybody in the class happy right now? And then you raise your hand. Oh, I'm happy, Mr. Hanley. And then I say, I'm sensing that you are happy because something good happened to you. And you'd be like, wow, you're such an amazing, you can read my mind. And it's like, no, you're kind of guessing. Okay, so that's what most of the time these kind of things are. Almost every time it's fake. Okay, and it's a con. And I sense this is what's happening here most of the time. But, so he says to this woman, I want you to, it looks like I'm frozen, but keep listening. He put on other clothes, verse 9. He says to her, please conduct a seance for me and bring up for me the one I shall name to you. He said, I want you to conduct a seance and bring up, I'm going to name somebody, you bring them up. She actually has a funny quote here. She says to him, look, you know what Saul has done, how he has cut off the medium spiritists from the land. Why then do you lay a snare for me to cause me to die? She is a medium, she is a spiritist, but she says, like, hey, buddy, listen, you know it's illegal. I'm not, what do you want, trying to get me in trouble because you know it's illegal? Because what she's doing is basically making sure that he's not going to get her in trouble. She's trying to look, because if he's like, let's say he was, he was somebody in authority, which he is, she'd be worried. I mean, put it this way. Let's pretend. Let's do a hypothetical. Let's say that you're not allowed to have we're not allowed to have phones in class, right? I don't know if you know that. I'm assuming you do. We're not allowed to have phones in class. And let's say I said to one of the kids in physics, in the physics class, the juniors, I said to, let's use one of your siblings, I said to Hope, Caleb, I said to Hope, hey, Hope, can you just look up on your phone, on your phone's calculator, can you do this calculation? And she says to me, what do you mean, Mr. Hanley? By rules, we're supposed to keep our phones in our locker. Of course I have my phone in my locker right now. And let's say she actually has her phone in her pocket. She would just be saying that because she doesn't want to get in trouble. And she'd say, and I say to her, she's testing me to see if it's a trick. Because I could be like, hey, Hope, could you take your phone out and dial this on your phone's calculator? And she takes her phone out and go, aha, you should have kept your phone in your locker. And I catch her. So because she's smart and thinking, I say, hey, can you take this out and do this on your calculator and your phone? And she says, what do you mean, Mr. Hanley? My phone? My phone should be in my locker. That's the school rule, is to have my phone in my locker, right? Or if I suspected somebody in the class, like I suspect Hector, you have some gum, I come up to you and say, Hector, can I have a piece of gum? I don't know if you have a piece of gum. Can I have a piece of gum? And you say to me, Mr. Hanley, we're not supposed to have gum in school unless we ask. Oh, what do you mean? I don't have any. Don't you know the rules, Mr. Hanley? No. And so it's one of those things where they're kind of testing. Wait a minute. I know the rules. So she says, hey. And he says, hey, I want you to conduct a seance for me. And she says, conduct a seance for you? You know that that's illegal to do. And so he says to her, as the Lord lives, no punishment shall come upon you for this thing. So he promises. That's a way to say a vow in the old days. He goes, I promise you, no harm shall come to you, no punishment will come to you. And so after he swears that no punishment will come to her, he says, she goes, okay, fine, we'll do it, which actually shows obviously that she was a medium, a witch. She goes, all right, let's get everything ready. And she gets in her place. I don't know, she has a little table she sets up or whatever, a little crystal ball or whatever she's doing. And she says, all right, who do you want me to bring up for you? And he goes, I want you to bring up Samuel. Now, notice she doesn't pause. Samuel's a very well-known person, okay? She doesn't say, Samuel, what do you want me to bring him up for? She just goes, okay, fine. And she goes and does it. The fact that it's a very famous person and she doesn't like balk at it and she doesn't say, Samuel, that's a pretty, you don't want to bring up your grandmother or you want to bring up somebody famous like that, and she doesn't think twice. It makes me think that she really was a faker. And what happens next makes me really think she's a faker. What happens is she goes, okay, fine. And so she does whatever she does there, whatever method she does her little, maybe she rings some bells or waves her hands around or something, says some magic words or something. And what does she see? But Samuel. Samuel just appears. And it says in verse 12, when she saw Samuel, she cried out with a loud voice. So, I mean, that sounds to me like she was very surprised. She exclaimed, what? Like, ma! She was, so this to me seems like this was, something that a person who would normally just be faking it. Okay, this wouldn't be somebody who's actually talking to a demon or something like that. She's just faking it. And so Samuel pops up. So it comes to the idea, this is a very troubling section. We don't really have a great answer, but why does this happen? Because as I said before, you can't by some method bring somebody up from the dead. Like, let's say I want to talk to the Apostle Paul, and so I try to conduct the seance or whatever, and I bring him up. That's not going to happen. Okay, if anything happened, it wouldn't actually be him. Okay, and so the only thing that would happen is if I was talking to a demon, which I wouldn't want to do. And so this wouldn't actually happen. And but so what? Why is this happening right now? I don't know. Maybe it's not actually Samuel. Maybe God is sending an angel or something. I don't think that's as likely. That's some people's explanation. It could very well be that God's just making an exception this one time. But I don't really have a good answer. But let's keep going. And so she realizes in verse 12 that this is actually Saul. And she says, why have you deceived me? For you are Saul. And the king said to her, don't be afraid. Just tell me, what did you see? Verse 13, the woman said to Saul, well, I saw a spear descending out of the earth. And he said to her, what is his form? What did he look like? And she said, well, he's an old man coming up, and he's covered with a mantle. And Saul perceived it was Samuel. He goes, okay, it's Samuel. And he stoops down and bows down to the earth to talk to Samuel. And in verse 15, Samuel says to Saul, why have you disturbed me by bringing me up? He goes, basically, what do you want? And Saul says, I'm deeply distressed, for the Philistines make war against me, and God has departed from me, and does not answer me anymore, neither by prophets or by dreams. Therefore I've called you, that you may reveal to me what I should do. He's like, and we see how pathetic Saul is. He's so obsessed with being a people pleaser. He's so obsessed with what other people think that he can't make a decision for himself. He can't lead without somebody else. Every time he tries to do something leadership-wise, he messes it up. And so he's saying, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. And here, I'm back. I don't know if I was a black screen before, but I'm back. And so he says to Samuel, I don't know what to do. God's not answering. I can't make a decision. I can't make a decision. And that's somebody who's weak, because that's somebody that can't make a decision. And so he's saying to Samuel, I need you to tell me what to do. I need you to tell me what to do. And Samuel says, so why do you ask me? In verse 16, seeing as the Lord has departed from you and become your enemy. Samuel's like, if God's not answering you, why do you think I would? And Samuel goes on and said, the Lord has done for himself as he spoke by me. For the Lord has torn the kingdom out of your hand and given it to your neighbor David. Do you remember he spoke this way after Saul ran after him and grabbed onto his robe and it tore, the hem tore away. And Samuel said, just like that, God has torn the kingdom away from you. He said this when he, I can't remember, it was either the unlawful sacrifice or when he refused to kill all the Amalekites. I believe it was when he refused to kill all the Amalekites. Oh, it tells in the next chapter, in the next verse, because you did not obey the Lord, nor execute his fierce wrath upon Amalek. Right? That's when he did that. He refused to. Remember the part where he was like, Samuel was like, destroy all men, every person, and all of their cattle. And so Samuel walks up, and Saul goes, I did what God wanted me to do. And Samuel's like, and yells, and you hear in the background, ma, ba. I can't really do a good ba right now. And Samuel's like, you did everything? Yep. Bah. He's like, well, then what did I hear? He goes, oh, that's a sheep. Okay, so you didn't do everything God wanted you to do. He goes, yes, I did. But God told you to kill all the sheep. He goes, I did kill all the sheep, except for the ones I didn't kill. Okay, then you didn't do what God asked you to do. Yes, I did. I killed all the sheep, except for the ones that I didn't kill. See what's so, it's kind of what Saul was saying there. But so that was his judgment here. Verse 19, moreover, the Lord will also deliver Israel with you into the hand of the Philistines. Now, Samuel is telling Saul what is going to happen. Israel is going to get delivered into the hands of the Philistines in this battle, and with Saul included. And he says, and tomorrow, to Saul, tomorrow you and your sons will be with me. And so he says to him, where is Samuel? He's dead. So he's saying, tomorrow you and your sons will be dead. And sadly, this does include Jonathan. That's why I said a few chapters ago that was the last time Jonathan and David would see one another, but Saul and his sons will all die in the battle. And verse 20, immediately Saul fell full length on the ground and was dreadfully afraid because of the words of Samuel, and there was no strength in him, for he had eaten no food all day or all night. So he had been fasting, trying to get God to answer him. God hadn't answered him. His strength left him. He fell on the ground, kind of fainted or fell over. And think how crazy this is. Verse 21, the woman of Midian, the witch, came to Saul and saw that he was severely troubled and said to him, look, your maidservant has obeyed your voice, and I have put my life in my hands and heeded the words which you spoke to me. I did everything you asked me to do. Now, therefore, plead also the voice of your maidservant, and please let me set some bread before you. She goes, let me just make you a meal. I did everything you asked me to do. Let me just make you a meal. Let me give you some food to eat. Now, this is a typical thing. This has happened with Saul a couple different times before. Saul says no. He refuses, but he refused and said, I will not eat. But his servants, together with the woman, urged him, and what did he do? He heeded their voice. This is what Saul does all the time. He's like, I'm not going to do that. And they go, come on. He goes, okay. That's what he does all the time, right? If he really was set in his mind that he wasn't going to eat, then if they urged him to eat, he wouldn't have done it. It was like the back before when he makes the foolish vow, and Jonathan breaks the vow by having some honey, and he had said, I promised the people, and this is why I said I think he was just doing it for recognition of the people. He said, I promise whoever it is, even if it's my son Jonathan, whoever it is that broke the vow, I'm going to kill him. I'm going to put him to death. And then it ended up being Jonathan. And for me, the reason I know it was an empty promise that he was just trying to look good in front of the people is because he'd already said, even if it's my son Jonathan, he goes, all right, fine, then we'll put him to death then. And any father wouldn't want to put his child to death. But let's just say Saul is like, you know what? I'm going to do it no matter what. I got to stick by my promise. I'm going to put him to death. Then he would have done it. But you know what happens? Remember what happens? He goes, all right, I guess it was Jonathan, so I'll put him to death then. And the people go, don't put Jonathan to death. He had a great victory. And he goes, okay, I won't do it then. Saul basically just does whatever the people want him to do. And so here he's like all upset. He's like, I'm not going to eat. I'm not going to eat. I'm just too depressed. I will not eat. And the woman and the servants go, no, come on, eat something. He goes, okay. And he just tries to please people. And he arose on the bed and sat on the bed. Now the woman had a fatted calf in the house, and she hastened to kill it. And she took flour and kneaded it and baked unleavened bread from it. And she brought it before Saul and his servants, and they ate, and they rose and went away that night. And it's crazy to think about that Saul is being comforted by a woman who's obviously not walking with the Lord. She's a witch. She's doing things that are against the Bible. But he's sitting here being comforted by her. And so he hears that he's going to die the next day. And so the next chapter, and that ends chapter 28. So this is chapter 27 and 28. And the next chapter, we're going to get back to David and see what happened with him and the Philistines. Remember, what happened earlier in the last chapter was David's, David's cunning scheme had kind of come to an end, and Achish goes, "Hey, you fight the Israelites all the time. Why don't you come fight them with me?" And David's like, "Hey, well, you know what I can do." It's like, "Great, be here tomorrow with your men, your army, ready to fight the Israelites." It's like, "Okay," and he's got to either refuse, which then they'll know that he's been lying to them the whole time, and who knows, maybe they'll turn against him and fight him, or he's going to actually fight and kill his countrymen. That's his big choice that comes up next time.